I've of course had many great teachers and journalism and writing mentors over the years. There's somebody who's had an impact on the way I work every single day, who's the lesson he taught me is worth telling. His name is Fred Barbash, and he recently retired from the Washington Post as an editor. I worked for him on the national staff of the Washington Post at this point 40 years ago. I was a very young reporter, and I was permanently assigned to the group of reporters following the Challenger accident, the destruction of the Space Shuttle Challenger and the death of those crew members. I was on the team that spent months reporting that. And the first big, long story I got to do as part of that reporting was about the search for the debris of the Space Shuttle Challenger. Challenger exploded over the ocean, so everything fell into the Atlantic Ocean. And NASA wanted to find every part of the space shuttle that they could, especially the parts involved in what caused the explosion on the solid rocket booster rockets. And they brought in the largest salvage team in history, which was run by the US Navy, and I was assigned by the Washington Post to write about and follow the search for Challenger debris at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. They were searching an area 6 times the size of the District of Columbia. And I spent 6 weeks working every single day on one story for Fred Barbash, and I turned that story in. I reported for 5 weeks or 5.5 weeks, and I sat and wrote for 3 or 4 days. And it was probably the most fun and engaging and important story I'd ever worked on personally. I'd only been a working reporter for 3 years at that point. I was 25. And I wasn't thrilled with how it came out, but I was pretty proud of all the work I'd done and that I'd written this story. And you turn a story like that in as a reporter, and the only thing you want to hear is what the editor thought. That's all you can wait to, did I hit it? And I was actually based in New Orleans at that time and working all around the country on the NASA story, but I happened to be in Washington to write that story. And Fred, of course, was based in Washington. But we got on the phone and he said, you've called me every day for 6 weeks with the latest story, absolutely breathless to tell me they found 25 kilograms of cocaine. It would pay for the whole search. They found another freighter at the bottom of the ocean. They found a plane that's been missing for 35 years. And that's why I've been looking forward to this story that you're writing. And I have to say, Charles, that you wrote a perfectly competent story. Anybody could read it and they would understand how important it was to find all the parts of Challenger and who did the work. But what's missing is all of the excitement that was in your voice every day, 6 days a week for 6 weeks. I want you to go back to your hotel. I want you to sit down with your notebooks and your notes and a legal pad. And I want you to make a list of the good stuff. Literally the good stuff, the stuff that you would call me from Cape Canaveral or Houston or Alabama without even saying it's Charles and just start talking. I want that stuff on the list. And then I want you to write your story around the good stuff. We'll figure out the funding and the congressional committee and who did what when, but you need to make sure that the good stuff is in the story, because that's why people are going to read. And 40 years later, when I write a story, when I write a book, I have on my computer a good stuff file. I keep track as I interview people, and then as I build a story or a book chapter or the whole arc of a book, I keep track of the good stuff, like Fred Barbash taught me 40 years ago, and I use those as the kind of the timbers, the framework of the story. I make sure that the most fun stuff I learned, the most exciting stuff, the stuff you pick up the phone and call your partner or your wife or your kids or your friends and say, you're not going to believe what I just learned. I make sure that that is the core of the story. And then you fit the required stuff around it. And so Fred changed the way I approached my work. It was the first time I got to write a long story for the Washington Post. He didn't rewrite the story for me. He didn't simply take the story and print it in the condition it was. He said to me, you can do better. And you've done better every day for 5 weeks. So now sit down and capture your own excitement in that story. And that has been truly one of the most important storytelling lessons I've ever learned, and that's what I do for a living, is tell stories. So I am really grateful to Fred for handling me that way and for passing on that lesson, which is a lesson I try and pass on when I talk at colleges and universities and to young journalists. Watch for the good stuff and make sure it's in your story.